You who don't know, my name is Shea Harty. I am one of the founders of Empower Amsterdam, which is a nonprofit that supports international professionals living in the Netherlands who are unemployed, and we provide free coaching, one-to-one coaching and workshops to help people get back on their feet in their careers and feel unstuck. Today we have Bogdan Manta, who is a how do I call you? A live professional. You're so many things because it's not just about live speaking, it's about presentation, it's about technical, it's about the psychology. There's so many things. Like, there's no one word to describe you. But we're so glad to have you here today as you tell us more about being presenting ourselves online and how to go about that. I want to let everyone know that we are recording. And if you keep your sound off, then you won't be in the recording. At least that's how we think it will go. If you take your sound off, then you will be in the recording. If you can pop any questions that you have, because the format is going to be completely different than normal. Normally we have a presentation and then we have questions. This time we're doing all the questions up front in the moment. Just ask away, put your questions in the chat, and Bogdan will respond to them and answer your questions that way. I see we're getting some more people in. So I'm just going to repeat the most important part. If you have any questions, put in the chat. And if you keep your sound off, you won't be part of the recording. This will be recorded. And as long as you keep your sound off, you shouldn't be recorded. And then you can, what do you call it? Enjoy or partake in it. It is a different format for those who are used to our other format. This is more of a fireside chat. So we do encourage participation. Bogdan will answer every question because he's so knowledgeable. He knows a lot. I mean, he knows a lot. No pressure. Anything he doesn't know, he'll let you know he doesn't know. But he's a very insightful guy. And I'm going to give it away to you now. It's on to you, Bogdan.
So thank you, everyone. First of all, thank you for coming. Thank you, Shea and Jane, and everyone at Empower Amsterdam for having me. Exactly, we said we're going to have a little bit of a different structure. The reason for that is we want to make sure that this session is as relevant as possible to you. That's why we're not going to have any presentation. We're not going to share any screen. So please ask away your questions. And I am going to add as much content and context as possible to it. And of course, everything you want to know about online meetings, interaction, the psychology behind certain things. We also have already some questions that have been asked before. And of course, one of the gracious ladies from Empower Amsterdam will ask the questions from the chat and I will be answering. But again, we want to keep these 90 minutes as interactive as possible. No question is taboo, unless it's a weird one, and we're probably going to skip it. But like I said, ask whatever is important for you, because we want to, again, make this as relevant and as tailored to your needs and what you need online, offline, or combination hybrid. So, should we get started? Should I take the first question that we had in that were pre-asked before the session?
Yeah, if you can, that would be great, and then we'll see.
Okay. So the first one was a tech question, and that was linked to Zoom. I have issues with connectivity, but only with a larger group of 20 plus people. Could you suggest solutions? And I asked a little bit about the context of that to understand. The situation was when you would have more than 20 people in a Zoom meeting, the microphone would start to click. Usually that happens because of the new version of Zoom, but that also happens in the previous version of Zoom, that you don't have your stereo sound on. To give you some quick insights, because Zoom has been, of course, exploding and now has a market share of 35 billion, more than the top 7 airlines in the world. And they had, of course, some issues in the past. They promised that they would change everything with a version 5, which they are now implementing. But because we're talking about very high bandwidth, so there's a lot of people with video calls on Zoom, Zoom did something very smart. They went into your default settings and they removed your stereo sound and your high definition video. So you actually have to go into your account on Zoom and to make sure that you have checked high definition video and stereo sound, which means you can have the best camera in the world. You're still going to transmit and start that definition if you do not have that ticked in. You can also do it if you have that, let's say, ticked turned on into your settings. Always you have your microphone and your video in your left bottom corner, and then you have to make sure that still you have them switched on. So that's one of the reasons. The second reason why you might have issues with the sound on Zoom is the very reason why Zoom is such an amazing tool. And I'm not promoting it, I'm not associated with any of them. The ones who know me know that I have been criticizing Zoom for the lack of security. The reason I am praising them is because I've never seen a company being so open about their problems, telling everyone, and that was through a blog of their CEO, that they will make changes and then actively working on these changes. And they keep on doing that. So from this point of view, they listened, they heard, and they're changing things. But one thing that Zoom has, which is different than any other software or program that you use for conferencing, they have implemented a sound where we can all talk at the same time. GoToMeeting and most of the software programs that we use work on a walkie-talkie system, which means one talks, the other one listens. One talks, the other one listens. Zoom has an audio software where we can all talk at the same time and we can all hear each other. And that makes it wonderful because it's real-time communication. But for that to work, they're working on how they reduce the background noises or sounds that you have via your microphone. So if sometimes you have weird clicks or anything like that, it's because you did not have your original sound turned on. And you go into the audio settings, and there in the advanced audio settings, you have to turn on original sound, and then you have to test which of the two options works. So this is why we have a lot of problems with the Zoom audio system. I hope this kind of makes a little bit of sense. There's a lot of very technical details. Zoom is very confusing right now because they decided to change so many things. Every week, they're changing the settings. So you get very confused because now buttons appear right and left. So it's very difficult to keep up with them. They launch version 5.0 now, and you will all be forced on the 29th, that is next week, you will be forced to update your Zoom. So I kindly recommend that you already make that update right now, because they will force update on the 29th, which means if you did not make the update by then and you are in a live conference, they will stop your conference and they will force you to update your program. So better do it now than to be forced offline later. I hope this helps. Any questions linked to that maybe we want to keep with the questions from the chat, or should I go to the next pre-asked question?
I have
a question myself about the security. Which medium do you prefer if you don't like Zoom because of the security? Do you use a different one?
Very good question, Yolanda. Like I said, I was the biggest criticizer of Zoom. I am one of their best ambassadors right now. I truly am, because like I said, what they did in 2 weeks and how they changed things, they have my respect. I love the breakout rooms. I think they're amazing for specific content things. The only thing is a trainer or the facilitator, they have to know how to use properly the breakout rooms. It's one of those things that it's great, but if you don't use it right, and we're talking there about how you disseminate content, how you facilitate the breakout rooms, and so on. And you're asking me about security. Zoom had a serious problem with security. The reason for that being, from the very beginning, they just wanted people to get quickly online. And Zoom was initially built for corporations, and every corporation has their IT people, and they make sure that they have their VPNs and security and so on. And that's why they didn't bother too much with the security, because each corporation would be very strict with the security of their IP addresses and all that. As everyone just exploded, right, because of the coronavirus, then they were a little bit behind. And to be very honest, it was not their fault. A lot of the things that happened with the security, with people entering, breaking through this kind of sessions, was because people did not add a password. or it was because people kept on using their individual URL, which hackers would find. They would find your individual URL and they would keep on hacking you. So in most cases, it is not the technology that is guilty. It is the human who doesn't use it right. And I'll say that again. Blaming the technology is nothing but an attribution bias. And we made studies, and studies show that if we blame the technology, people actually think that you are to blame because you didn't plan. And in general, that is the case. It's very rarely the technology will fail. It is the facilitator or the trainer or the presenter who did not plan enough to be sure that he or she knows what they're doing. Now, going back to your security question, Zoom now has one of the highest levels of security, but you need to be sure that you have a password on the meeting, and also that you never use your individual URL to create meetings, but you always create a random URL. You can add a next layer of security on Zoom, which is having a registration page. So participants will receive a link, they have to click on it, they have to register with their email address and so on. And then as they register, each of them will receive an individual URL to join, which means at that point you are totally in control. So that is the third level of security that you can add. And I always recommend for that. Of course, if we have 30, 40 participants, it's enough to have a meeting with a password. If you go into a workshop setting or in something which is more private, 6 to 8 people or 10 people, then I always suggest that we create a registration page as an extra buffer.
Right. Cool. Thank you. There's a couple of questions in the chat.
Yes.
We have two from Renee. One is has to do with this. It says, which platform would you use for webinars? I've heard that there are better platforms for Zoom than that. Do you agree so, and which one?
So first of all, Reese, nice to see you again. It's been a while since we saw each other face to face. With a lot of questions, my answer will always be, it depends. And the reason I'm saying it depends is because we need to have a completely holistic approach to how we see webinars. And I always say it's not about the what, it's about the why. Why are you doing it? Do you want to inspire people? Do you want to promote something? Do you want to have interaction? Why are you doing it? Then how are you going to do it? What type of physical context are you going to use? Is it more camera? Is it more Q&A? Is it more audio? Is it more live? Are you sharing the screen? All these elements then will give you the what. And only then you actually decide what platform will help you. So one of the things that I see is that we limit ourselves, we limit our content and what we want to deliver online because of a specific program. You don't have to only use one. You can use 2 programs, 3 programs. Those who join our webinars, and maybe it's good to pause here. If I talk about our webinars or workshops, not for a second I'm trying to promote them. I have no intention to promote our webinars or workshops, but if I mention them, it's just because I link to them. But again, it's not for me. I'm not here to promote anything and anyone. And those of you who know me, you know that that's the case. Now, in our webinars, for example, we use different softwares altogether. So don't limit yourself only to one. Make technology work for you. Do not limit yourself and the experience you give to your audience because of a specific software. Now, to go back to what you asked, Reese, yes, there are specific things. I use Zoom mostly for workshop format, which means a small amount of people, highly interactive. I never shared my screen on Zoom, and I will never share my screen on Zoom because in my opinion, and that's again, 17 years of show production, we see shows and experiences completely different. And if it comes to a webinar, what we want to achieve is the best, higher quality, high definition, high experience for the participants. One of those, because of many of those reasons, we don't use Zoom. Also on Zoom, you cannot share a video. I'll say that again. You should never share a video on Zoom. If you want to share a video on Zoom via your share screen option, you will share the audio as stereo, but the video will be incremental sequences. And this is what your audience will see, incremental sequences. I know someone who has epilepsy and she had an epileptic seizure because someone shared a video on Zoom. So if you do want to share a video on Zoom, there is a way how to do that. And the easiest way is to have the URL from YouTube, for example, or wherever you have that video. You drop the URL and you allow everyone to go and to watch the video in their own, for their own screen. and then everyone comes back. Very important here, queuing online is fundamental. Online people experience a live experience, which is why queuing is so important. Before you drop the URL with the video, ask everybody to mute their microphones. What I see is that the URL is being dropped, people click, the video starts, you start to hear it through everyone's microphones, there's microphony, and then everyone gets interrupted. So first, ask everyone to mute themselves. And when you see that everyone is muted, then drop the URL with the video. Everyone can watch it in their own time. Then everyone comes back. And that is one of the ways how to do it. Of course, we use much more specific, complex tools and programs where basically the video is web-based and we control everything, right? It's like in the highlight zone, we control the horizontal, we control the vertical. But those are very complex programs that we use. In general, I always suggest to try as many things as possible and see what works for you and for your content. You know, make technology work for you. It's a, you know, I know it's a complex answer, but it was a very complex question, and I hope, Reese, that that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense, but I think that was actually for somebody else, that question.
Oh.
Yeah, it was from Renee. Sorry, there was a. I think
oh, okay. I
not Reese, but from
yeah.
Renee. But we do have another. We have a few questions coming in, and we just had some people join. So I just want to say one more time that we are recording this session. So if you have just joined us, please put your questions and comments in the chat, and we'll answer them there. If you do come off mute, you will be on the recording. So just so you know. But we have a question from Tamara. Sorry if I said that wrong.
Tamara, yeah.
And she says, could you give some possible theoretical frame sources that could explain what I experience on Zoom meetings? It's something that we all experience in face-to-face situations. Some are more or less aware of it, but now it is even stronger. So here's the question. How is it possible that I can feel the people participating in meetings, particularly good for the one who speaks longer, and I also feel the group energy? We all feel that in a live meeting, but as on Zoom, I feel it more clearly. So it sounds like she's feeling the energy more clearly now on Zoom than she did in live meetings, is what I'm understanding.
Of course, Tamara.
And so
and that is,
what's that?
what
does it
the
mean?
power of voice. Very good question, by the way, and I'm very, very happy you're asking that question. And nice to see you, Tamara. Thank you for joining. It's a very good question, and there's two reasons for that. The reason why you perceive or you experience much more of what a person says than offline. Number one is the voice, and number two is the lack of peripheral vision. And I will touch on the voice. What if there would be one of the top 5 tips that I could give you as you are online is become aware of the power of your voice. Voice is fundamentally important online, much more than offline. Offline, you have your body language, physiological changes. There's a lot of context around. You no longer have that online. Online, you are in a frame, and what you see is 1/3 of the person. You focus on the person's facial gestures and voice, 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 voice. Pauses are fundamentally important. As you are looking into a live broadcast, suddenly your peripheral vision disappears. In an offline environment, the peripheral vision plays an important role. You see the person next to you drinking a coffee, someone is doing something, the trainer is moving around, there's a flip chart, you move around. As you are in an online format, the peripheral vision disappears. You're only looking into the computer, which means that you fixed your sight on the presenter and your voice is helping you take the input on a much higher speed. There's an advantage and a disadvantage to that. The advantage is that indeed, from a stimuli psychological perspective, you perceive and you feel that person's energy much more sometimes online than offline, because you hear the voice reverberation, voice inflection, and so on. The disadvantage is that you get absolutely exhausted. And I wanted to link this with what we call the Zoom fatigue, and the reason why psychologically we are a lot more exhausted online than offline. To give you a quick info into that, in general, you are double the exhaustion happens online than offline. So you'll be more exhausted 2 hours of online training versus 4 hours of offline. For the facilitator, if you have a highly facilitated conversation where you also have a lot of eye contact with your participants on the screen, it can be 4 times more exhausting. And I'm saying this for those of you who are trainers or facilitators. Do not put yourself in the situation of running a 6-hour workshop. Your participants are exhausted and you will be dead for 3 days. So we need to understand that so first of all, the lack of peripheral vision. We are paying much more attention, but it's the same way as the battery of a phone. I can have my phone, right? So I'll show you my phone. My phone is on standby. The battery of my phone will last for a day. But the moment I have a program which is using a lot of my battery, the phone will drain in 3 hours. It is exactly what happens to our brain. The moment I'm focused and I'm paying a lot of attention to what happens on the screen and I listen, I use a lot of more brain energy, also because of how the image is on the retina, and you will get exhausted much faster. You need to have pauses with your participants. Normally after 50 minutes up to 1 hour of training or workshop, you should have a change of setting, a pause, a change of format. And then pauses should always be at least 15 minutes. Very important, because then people walk around, peripheral vision will work again, attention span will increase, and then you bring them back into the room. And again, as you see, I'm always linking one thing to the other, and that goes back to what I always say, it depends. There's a lot of complex things that we look into. It's not about only the content, it's the context. And we have a physical context, a cultural context, a social context. While we put these things together to make a difference between having a session online or being memorable. Another question.
Yeah, thank you. Anna asked a while ago, currently, what is the best free platform or service to hold a 1-hour video call, up to 30 participants and with 2 presenters, and the option for the attendees to ask questions?
Right.
Also
this is one of the things that I call, there is not a one-size-fits-all experience. I don't have an answer for that. You need to research it yourself and you need to find the platform that works best for you. Online, there is no one-size-fits-all. Because I'm going to go back to you and I'm going to say, who are the participants? What is their background? Where are they coming from? Is it morning? Is it afternoon? What is the light? Do you have direct light or not? Is it warm in the room? Do you have a microphone? What kind of interaction are you going to have? Knowing all these things yourself, then you have to go into research what works best for you. I think Zoom allows for 40 minutes for free. You can try Microsoft Teams, for example, but Microsoft Teams is very limited in terms of interaction that you want to create. My suggestion, if I am to ignore everything and just to give you an answer, I would say go to Google Meet or Google Hangouts. Google Meet is amazing. It's free. You're not getting anything except for sharing your screen and having video calls. But if this is what you want, if you just want to have like a share screen option and chit-chatting with people, then Google Meet it's very easy to use. There's 3 buttons. You're not going to get complicated. 3 buttons: video, audio, share screen. Wow. And I think Google Teams will always be free as well. They're not charging anything because they're so desperate to get into the fight with Zoom and with Hangouts didn't work. Now they're trying Google Meet. It's very simple. Maybe that will work. But again, I would advise to take a step back and to think of what your participants expect in that hour, the 30 of them, and interaction and so on. And that will allow you to actually, maybe there's nothing free. Maybe you actually need to invest into something that will increase the level of quality you offer to your 30 participants. So it's all very much depending on that. I hope that answers the question.
Yes, thank you so much. There's not any more questions in the chat right now, but so could you go to the questions that you had emailed to?
Yes, there was one which was very interesting, and that was, how do you deal with private chat messages when in the middle of a presentation? And it's a fabulous question. How do you deal with private chat messages when in the middle of a presentation? You do not acknowledge them. You do not respond to them. And let me explain. When we are in a live environment, you are supposed as a facilitator to acknowledge the public questions. So when you ask questions in a public environment, right, like you ask to everyone, when everyone can see those questions, you as a facilitator should acknowledge them, because we're going to the 3 fundamental needs People want to be heard, people want to be acknowledged, people want to understand that they make a difference. So if someone takes the time to write you a question publicly, you should make the time to acknowledge it and then to answer to it, depending on where you are in your content. You can park it and say, hey, I see these questions, I acknowledge it, let me answer to it next, or you can add it into your content and move on. I'm talking about public questions. If someone is asking you a question privately, as you are live in front of a camera, you are live in front of a camera. When I'm on TV and I have the show producer talking in my ear, I'm not introducing the broadcast saying, oh, sorry, ladies and gentlemen, I have a question from my show producer. Let me stop the transmission and can you buy milk? For as long as people do not ask you in public, you are not in any way to answer to private messages. You can follow up afterwards. You can also acknowledge and say, guys, I see that some of you are sending me private messages. I just want to let you know we are here to do this together. So please, if you have questions which are relevant for the whole session and for the participants, please ask them publicly. Private questions will be answered after, not in a live environment. Please send them to me on LinkedIn. I had someone who was calling me. She was in the session and she was calling me to check if I was live with her. And I was like, do you think I'm just going to answer and say, oh, sorry, guys, wait, I'm talking to someone who is there. Let me do some microphony. Hey, what you doing? No. You are there to create a live experience and broadcast for your participants. And you are not supposed to stop everything because of one participant. Let's go back to offline. Offline, if you present in front of 30 people and one of them kind of, needs something, you're not stopping because one person needs a glass of water, right? If one person needs something, you will say, we'll park it and we'll talk about it later. The same thing should apply offline. We are here to provide an experience for the whole participants. I hope that answered the question.
Yes, thanks so much. And I really love your example of the producer talking in your ear. That was really good.
Yeah, it's the same thing, and linked to that, maybe it's something to add a little bit. One of the things that I see, because it's about the questions, you need to acknowledge the questions that are coming in, and I cannot emphasize on this enough, asking people to join and to ask their questions and then ignoring their questions or not acknowledging the questions is the same way as inviting people to a party, and it's where they're coming to your party, you close the door and you leave. It is exactly the same thing. If you invite people to join your party, you better be with your open arms, and you better have the drinks prepared. Don't lock the door, don't leave. You need to acknowledge people's answers. You need to welcome them. You need to say thank you. Even if it's a question you don't know how to answer, say thank you, and it's a great question and I'm going to look into it. This is how interaction works. This is how we build credibility. This is how we transform something from a one-way communication to an integrative establishing rapport type of experience.
Okay, great. Well, then I'd like to acknowledge Katrina's question. She has a question in chat here. So as a recruiter, I expect to have to sell online to clients to win projects as we can't travel at the moment. Have you got any tips that can help us be more memorable than our competitors?
Show up naked. I'm always joking. So that is definitely a very, very good question. Very good question. And showing up naked is not one of them. Keep in mind that online, there's a few things that matter most than offline, and one of them is our presence. How do you appear in the frame? One of the things that I see is the positioning of the camera. And I will explain. If you are like here, so if your camera is under you, you're going to look from up down into the camera. First of all, what you do, you have this double, triple, quadruple chin, which we don't want to have. But what happens is that it looks like you are looking, as you're looking from up down, it looks like you're looking down at people. This is one of the biggest mistakes that I see happening with recruiters, especially. If you are talking with business partners, you need to establish rapport. You need to be at an equal height, which means the camera, the webcam, whatever you use, has to have exactly the equal height as where you are positioned. So we're talking here about a lot of subconscious stimuli where people will not feel comfortable with you. They don't know why, but they don't feel comfortable with you. This is one of them. If the laptop is lower, add books under, put boxes under. Make sure that you are at an equal level with your participants. Also, eye contact. what I see very often is that people always look into, into the screen. When you're talking to people, if I'm talking to you right now, I'm going to look into the camera and I'm going to acknowledge you and we are going to have a conversation. I can scan through the things, of course, as we speak, but if you're having eye contact offline, why would you not have eye contact offline? And I see this a lot happening online. People are like talking here and eye contact, establish rapport, active listening, going back to that. When someone is talking, try to look into the camera and acknowledge, nod affirmatively. Okay, I hear you. I hear what you say. I hear you. I really do. These are things that we register subconsciously, and it will change completely the way people will establish rapport with us or not. Another important element on that is having the camera too high, like here. And then if I'm looking up, it looks like I'm on an unequal level with you, and it looks like I'm looking for your approval. That's why you should always be on an equal level. That's only one of the things. Then we're going into the physical context, which is how you're dressed, how you fit in the camera. You should not be here, right? And you should not be like here either. You should not be too much in front. You should not be too much in back. You need to find a place, look at the television, look at the TV anchor people, and just see the distance they have between their shoulders and their heads in the frame. This will emphasize your professional approach when you are talking to someone. And very important is the way you nod. As you talk, you need to nod a lot more online than offline. You're not a person who nods. You need to be that. You need to adapt to an online environment. And as we are online, we will always compare you with a show broadcaster or with a TV anchor. But this is why you always listen to the TV anchor, because the way they talk, the way they move their body language, and how confident they are. This is what you want to do online. I hope that helps. Well done.
Yeah, I already
And
see.
smile. I'm always saying smile, smile, smiles, because you know what it is? When it comes to online, you have one element, which is the combination between you, your facial gestures, and your voice, and that is smiling. Every time I call KLM, American Express, whomever I call, I smile on the phone because they will hear it and they will feel great and I feel great, and we always solve whatever challenge. People will react, they will love you when you actually talk to them and you smile and you laugh and you move and so on. Don't forget to smile. It also changes your voice inflection. It makes you more human. You develop oxytocin, which is the bonding neurotransmitter or the brain chemical. That's what people will remember.
I saw a lot of head nods and people adjusting their cameras and positions already.
Look,
So I was already doing it.
And again, maybe it's good to add on that. Ladies and gentlemen, we don't know what we don't know. We were all forced to go into an online environment. Nobody told us what was supposed to be online. So don't feel offended if you think, oh my God, I've done this wrong for so long. We don't know what we don't know. I've done 17 years of production, show calling, and pitching, and I have a background in psychology. So I've learned this over many, many years, and I've learned this over many, many mistakes. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. Don't be afraid to try new things. Try new software. You're gonna mess up. It's not the end of the world. You're gonna mess up, you learn from it, see what you learn, move on. But don't be shy to try. Don't limit yourself. Plus it's online. I'm changing my outfits 3-4 times in a workshop. I think I'm in the Oscars. Am I crazy? Maybe. Do people love it? Absolutely. Is that an experience? Yes. Change your outfit. Just don't go naked.
Related to that, there's a question about the background. So she says, is a blank background better than a busy one, or what do you think?
Background is part of the physical context, and it's part of subconscious, unconscious biases, or the way we perceive participants or a speaker. We perceive a speaker very much based on the little details that we get around, and within the first 7 seconds, we already have a preconceived expectation of that person. Therefore, the background plays a very important role. Now, we're going a little bit into cultural background here, and we need to understand, for example, some people do not feel comfortable with sharing their background. I'm working with refugees. We do pro bono workshops for refugees, and we don't always ask them to switch on their cameras because they're in an environment which is not theirs. They're in a refugee center, and they don't like the background because they cannot identify as a human being with what's behind them. and we don't force them to put the camera on. And sometimes we see trainers who are upset that they don't put the camera on. And I'm always saying, is it about you or is it about them? Because if it's about them and they don't identify with what is behind them, forcing them to go into that live environment can have quite a difficult effect on refugees, for example. So first of all, my answer is, whatever your background is, be comfortable with it. Make sure it's something that you are comfortable with. If it's your home, choose a place that you like most, or choose a place that, do you see blue lights in the background? Yes. Do I have backlight on that wall? Absolutely. Am I playing with it every time? Sure thing. It's fun. Make sure you create an environment which is not too distracting, very important. If it's just a simple or just a wall, fine. If that's what you're comfortable with, then people will really focus on you. If you want to add some small little elements, fine, do that as well. I'll give you an example. Hey Google, switch launch to green. Well,
changing blue light to blue.
It went to blue. Switch launch to green.
Sorry, I didn't understand.
Yeah, she didn't understand. I wanted to show you, but there you go. You know, show production always fails. Should I be ashamed about it? Absolutely not. Try, test and fail, test and fail, test and fail. This is why we do it. What did I learn? She doesn't always recognize my voice. You know, I will never do it live. There you go. So, next question.
Thank you.
I hope this answers. The background is it has so much psychology, so much identity. We are talking here about identity. Someone's background is someone's identity. Changing your background to, maybe it's good to add on that as well. Changing to a virtual background is fine, but then make sure that either you have a green screen or that your palms are not disappearing. Because if I'm going to change my background, and let me show you, I'm going to go and I'm going to change my background to this. It's pretty fine, but my hands, my palms disappear. This is weird. If you don't have a green screen and this kind of happens, I'm saying better not. Just a thought. That's it. Next question.
Konstantina asks, do the same rules apply when you are interviewing for a job role?
Yes.
Do these same rules apply?
Oof, that is a 6.5-hour answer. We're covering that in a workshop that we're going to announce next week. And again, I'm not talking about it because we want to promote it. It's because it's such a complex question. When you talk about online job interviews, this will become the new normal. So we need to really become aware of the fact that maybe your first and second interview will be online. As we're talking about that, there are three important elements which are impacting how you are going to be perceived. Number one is physical context. What you wear, how you're dressed, background in the back. Next to that is all the technical details. Do you have a good camera? Do you have a good microphone? Next to that is the way we interact. Do you look at them as you talk? Do you look down? Where are you? That's another thing. And then the third thing goes to content, of course. And by content is, when do you ask questions? Do you check if they're feeling uncomfortable or not? How do you respond to the questions they're asking? So there are so many elements to look into. But what I would say is, wear clothes that make you feel strong. I will always wear red. Red is a good color that fits me. I'm also colorblind, so most color I don't see. I wear red and I feel very comfortable in red. Make sure that when you see yourself in that screen in the screen, that you're confident and comfortable. And you're not doing it for them. You're doing it for you. If you feel comfortable in front of the camera, they will feel that, even if it's via a video, because this is what is amazing about human beings. We see little things and we feel the energy even via a screen. Make sure you show up on time. I cannot emphasize on this enough. Make sure you are there 2 minutes before. Make sure that you are logged in. I think this is something so important. They should see that you are in the waiting room, waiting for 3 or 4 minutes before 1 o'clock or before 2 o'clock, which means offline, you do the same thing. You don't show up in the company at 2 p.m. You show up 5 minutes or 7 minutes before, you let them know that you're there, and they say, wow, he or she is there already 5 minutes ahead of time. That's a very good start. Do the same thing. Be in that waiting room 5 minutes before, be present and be ready. It makes a world of difference. And it's one of the things that we judge people when either they don't show up on time or they just jump in and they're like sweaty and say, oh, I'm so sorry. That means you did not plan. Plan, produce, perform. Plan, produce, perform. There's just a couple of things. Again, nodding affirmatively, asking questions. Make sure there's no cats, there's no dogs, there's no kids. If you have children or whatever, for that 1 hour that you have your online job interview, it is a job interview. Make sure you have the silence around it and then nothing will distract you. Make sure your phone is on silent, because if your phone starts ringing during that online interview, you lost it. It means that you don't care enough about the interview to mute your phone. Small little details that will make the difference between you getting that second interview and the live interview. And the last thing, we're talking here about psychological behavioral profiling. Make sure that whomever you are in your profile, LinkedIn profile, whatever you have presence on Facebook, whatever you post, that persona, make sure that you are the same person in a live job interview, and you better make sure that you are the same person when you meet them face to face. Because if there's any disconnection between the three, you're gone. And I see this again happening a lot. I see people, I even had a video recently about that. I see people who are, I know them offline, they behave in a completely different way on LinkedIn, and then you see them live online, and I'm like, you are three different people. How is that possible? I will not want to work with you because it doesn't give me any trust. And for me, trust is important. I hope this answers the question. It's a very complex question. And again, let's be ready for that. Studies show that most of the first and second round of job interviews will happen online.
Thank you again. Going back to looking in the camera, we have a question from somebody that says, if I look in the camera, I cannot look at the face of the people. So we have a lot of coaches on the line. Is there a trick to overcoming this? This specific person is a coach. So
that is again one of the it depends. Because if we are sending out information, so like me now, there is no reason for me to look at your faces because I'm talking, I'm saying, I'm giving you content. And then once in a while, I'm going to scan to see if there's something happening. I'm going to go back to talk. So that is one type of communication. If I'm going into a workshop, which is 6 to 8 people, for example, I will only have 7 faces. And then I will always look into the camera, look into the camera, look into the camera, and then look at the people. If I do a one-on-one private coaching session, then as I talk to you, I'm supposed to kind of look into the camera, talk to you, but also see how you react. But as it's only one person, I only have one switch. When I have 6 people, I have 6 switches. If I have 30 people, I have 30 switches. So we need to understand how we switch. Next to that, how close are you to the camera? If I'm going to be here, as I'm checking you, you can see my eyes move. But if I'm going to be here, same thing, TV anchors. There's a reason we have a certain distance from the teleprompter, so you do not see as I'm reading from the teleprompter. Now I'm reading from the teleprompter, you can't see it in my eyes. If I'm too far, you're not going to see me anymore. So it depends if you're having 30 people, 6 people, 2 people. If it's a one-on-one session, you have to check. And if you're a coach, indeed, you need to check the physiological changes of the person. Is he or she yawning? How is their body language? Are they biting their lips? If they're biting their lips, it means that they're withholding information from you, and then you have to address it. If, for example, they nod in a very strange way, or if you have people who sit like this, that means they're bored. So if you see them like this, you better this is a side of boredom. We're going to behavioral profiling, and where every single movement on your face and your body means something in the whole context of things. So read the person, ask them, how do you feel right now? And if they say, I'm feeling great, and you're saying, really? Because I see you're biting your lips. Is that a tic that you have? Are you aware of it? Should we talk about it? You have to pay attention to that. But as you talk about it, you say, look, I'm doing this. It's one thing to say this, look, I'm doing this, versus saying, look, I'm doing this. Are you checking yourself or are you showing to them? Cueing, visual cues, fundamental. I hope that answers the question.
Yes, I think so. And it kind of, I don't know, for me, it kind of connects. There was a question earlier that we didn't get to ask about what is neuromarketing exactly and how does it work in practice? And so I think you just started touching on that a little bit.
Right. Well, neuromarketing is a major field. Basically, to sum it up, and I'll give examples because I think that showing examples is easier than mumbling about neuromarketing. Neuromarketing is the way we use neuroscience and neuropsychology into marketing, sales, product placement, and so on and so forth. And I'll give you a few examples. How many of you have been to Las Vegas? Right. Those of you who have been to Las Vegas or have entered the casino, you know that in the casino, they have those extremely ugly carpets. The carpets are screaming ugly. There's all the colors and so on. That is neuromarketing. The reason the carpets are so ugly is to keep your eye away from the carpet and into the slot machines. The reason they have ugly lights on top is because they only want you to look into the slot machine. So what we do with neuromarketing or neuropsychology, we use specific stimuli for the three parts of the brain, where we're talking about the reptilian brain, we're talking about the cognitive brain, we're talking about the emotional brain. I'm not going to go much into that, but we use stimuli and the fifth senses, context, and so on to make sure that you take a certain purchase decision. And I know some of you will be asking, isn't it manipulating? No, it's stakeholder management. We don't force you to make a purchase decision. It has to be appearing like it is your free will. I'll give you an example. You go into a store and it smells like perfume, right? It's really strong sense of perfume. And you think, they want to make me buy a perfume. That's why there's perfume everywhere. No. There is that sense of the perfume will trigger a certain color into your brain, and it just happens that we're selling red clothes that day. And you will purchase red clothing because of the smell of that perfume that will trigger certain colors in your brain. Also, there's a second reason to that, because you are convinced that you say, they want me to buy perfumes. I'm going to stay away from the perfumes. Free will, free choice, great. I have my own free choice over what I'm going to buy. So I'm going to buy red clothes. I'm going to show them. You go into the supermarket and you have someone who is making little, little animals from the balloons. And they will give it to the child and say, oh, that's so nice. They're giving little balloons to the child. We're involving the tactile senses. And because we deliver the tactile senses in the children will take you to the toy department and they will force you to buy toys, although they already have a lot of toys. And instead of showing something to your kid and say, hey, don't do this to my kid, now we have to buy it, they will just give you something, you will play with it, and then the kid will want to buy that from the toy store. This is a little bit of neuromarketing to explain. We're not manipulative in any way. We are using cognitive stimuli and a lot of other things to understand how the human behavior works and how your purchase decisions or how your biased decisions are influenced by stimuli, colors, product, tactile, and all that. I hope that kind of answers the question. It's something that I was involved with, but it's not something that I have actually I've never been involved into actual doing sales and product placement. My experience is from events, productions, and so on, where you use neuromarketing to create the best possible experience for the participants. And what we do, we discover touch points in the participant's journey that we create the best possible experience that you ever had in your life. And it goes back to one of my favorite quotes from Maya Angelou: people will forget what you said, they will forget what you did, but they will never forget how you made them feel. So let's say we use the positive side of neuromarketing, where we use it to give participants the best possible experience, not to make them purchase things, because I've never been into commercial purchasing or stuff. So, but yeah, there's different ways of using neuromarketing.
Okay, there's not any other questions in the chat right now, so you can choose one from your list.
So there was one question which I thought it was brilliant, and I really want to touch on it, and that was where you should sit in the screen, and I touched a little bit on it, but the question has, which one is right? How far back should you sit? Because sometimes I'm not wearing any pants. Okay. Let me give you an example. I'm waiting for a package from PostNL. I told them to come after 3 p.m., but PostNL might come earlier. As I hear the doorbell, my Pavlovian instinct will make me jump off the chair and go answer the door. If I'm not wearing any pants, go figure. So number one, you need to be prepared that sometimes you drop your coffee over the laptop and you start moving the computer like this, and then people will see that you're not wearing any pants. That's the second thing. And the third thing is, how much are you going to put into showing up? Are you just showing up, or are you giving more than just showing up? Are you just showing up to a job interview, or are you making sure that you're going to nail it? Are you showing up to a presentation, or are you making sure you're impactful and memorable? Are you showing up just to listen, or are you showing up there to make a difference? If that is the case, you better wear pants. You better make yourself ready and prepared to learn, share, develop, whatever. Time is very precious for human beings. Why would you waste your own time by not being ready? Why would you waste other people's times by not giving them the best possible experience, which also includes you wearing pants? I did not invent psychology, I only apply it. Is there any other question?
I've got one at the moment. I was going to type it out and then I thought,
yes.
I'll speak it. If you based on Zoom fatigue and everything, when you're building an online event, and like you said about real events where you give people coffee breaks, is there like times that, if you have 20 minutes and then an event and then 20 minutes and something else, is there a good time?
Such a good question, and thank you so much for asking. It's such a good question. My answer is it depends. So let's take it like this. The question is that a training, which means with a smaller amount of people where there's a lot of interaction, or is it a webinar? If it's a webinar, let's take the webinar first. A webinar means you sending out information to people, and a webinar should be maximum 90 minutes in that format. You can make it 2 hours, for example, but then you need to have like 60 to 90 minutes of active presentation. And by active presentation, I mean you should allow people to ask questions as you present and show your slides and so on. Take the questions, answer to them. That should be around 60 to 90 minutes. Then you can switch into doing an exercise. So you can actually do it maximum 2 hours without a break. Of course, we're talking about the experience and neurotransmitters and how we develop dopamine, adrenaline, oxytocin, glutamate, noradrenaline. I'm not going to go there. How we use these things to create the experience in a webinar. But when you're sending out information, I would say staying within 90 minutes. 60, of course, if you're actually not having Q&A. If you're having constant interactive Q&A, I would go to 90 minutes. You don't need to have a break for that. But then you need to make sure you keep the attention span high of your participants, because attention span will start here, depending on the credibility and how you open. And I'm going to touch a little bit on everyone on top of you. Depending on that, attention span will anyway go down. We need to understand attention span always decreases. Studies show within a 45-minute, for example, training, attention span starts here, keeps on decreasing, decreasing, decreasing. 7 minutes before, when you know that it's finishing in 7 minutes, boop. Now, the way you work with this attention span is, if you have something good at the beginning, first it will go high, then down. You have a cliffhanger, a little bit high, down. You make people laugh, endorphins, down. You do an exercise, up, down. And then 7 minutes, and it's up. And by the way, as I'm showcasing you this, for you to see it left to right, I'm doing it right to left. So for you to read, as I'm saying, plan, produce, perform, I have to do it counterclockwise for me, because otherwise, if I will do it plan, produce, perform, we are all European and we read left to right. So if I'm doing this to you, you will be so visually confused. As we are reading left to right, you have to do right to left for your audience to get it left to right. It's confusing. Same thing, if I'm saying clockwise, I'm going to do counterclockwise for you to do it clockwise. These are the little elements that will confuse your audience, but if you do it right, they will say, wow, this makes so much more sense. Now, going back, so that's a webinar, right? If we're going into, let's say, what we call a training or a workshop, we're talking about maybe between 2 and 4 hours. Between 2 and 4 hours, we should have, I'm saying that if it's like 2 hours, you should have 1 break. If it's 4 hours, maybe you have 2, 3 breaks. I would say 3. And then it depends very much, Jane, on the type of content. And you know how you want to use it, when to use, I mean, when you have interaction or not. But I would, in general, for this type of highly interactive sessions, I would always recommend a break every hour, like 60 to 80 minutes. And then the break, very important, cueing again. If you break, please tell people, put their cameras off, put their microphones off. You don't want to know what I hear when we have the break and people still have their microphones on. I'm coming from a show production environment. It's nothing more fun than when you have speakers, and I was to be the show caller, so I'm the one who calls the show with headphones, and we hear everything with the technical team. There's nothing more embarrassing than when you have a speaker on the stage who finishes the presentation and he or she has to run to the toilet, and they run to the toilet before we take the microphone away. And of course the microphone is cut off, you don't hear it in the room, but the microphone is still live with us. You don't want to hear, you don't want the technical people to hear you in the toilet. Make sure when people go into a break, they switch off their cameras, they turn off their microphone. It is for everybody's advantage. So Jane, that links back to you. Now, there's another important element there, and that is the way you disseminate the content and how you create interaction. And again, that links again to it depends, but you should always have a connective, what I always recommend, and again, this is not a one size fits all, and this is also one of the things where you know your content, you know what works. I'm not here to, you know, to tell you to change what you know how to do. I'm saying make sure that you implement this online kind of specifics. You need to have interaction. Interaction is very important. And if it's a workshop, I joined 2 weeks ago someone's workshop. It was a workshop, and the gentleman spoke about himself for the first 50 minutes. Me, I did this, I did that. I'm like, I don't care. Nobody cares. What's in it for them? WIFT. What's in it for them? WIFT. Tell your audience what is in for them. Don't tell them that you have 4 kids, 5 cats, and you run naked through the fields. If it's not relevant to your content, your audience doesn't care. We've run studies based on attention span and credibility. Credibility happens at the beginning of your session. This is where your credibility starts. The way you present yourself and develop yourself would either drop the attention span, like sink the attention span, or increase the attention span. I can start by welcoming you and saying, this is my experience, this is what we learned, 17 years, neuroscience, neuropsychology, and this is why I think it's going to be interesting for you today, and I can help with, you know, sharing as much information as possible. Or I can start with me, blah, blah, blah. I'm a hand balancer. I do handstands. We do handstands, we sit upside down, and we do hand balancing and so on. That is not relevant to you today. So if it's not relevant to your participants, keep that information for yourself. Once again, I did not invent psychology, I only apply it. And there was one last thing, very important, which is what I call everyone on top of you. I think this is one of the biggest, and I will call it a mistake because it is a mistake. I think this is one of the biggest mistakes that I see happening online. When we start a session, workshop, training, whatever it is, and we allow people to join with the microphones on. Everyone should join muted. I say that again. Everybody should join muted. The first 3 to 5 minutes of every, Shea is laughing, and she has an awesome microphone, but I'm going to touch on that as well. The first 3 to 5 minutes, ladies and gentlemen, are when and these are studies, are when the attention span of your participants is the highest. I say that again. The highest attention span of your participants will be in the first 3 to 5 minutes of every session. Now, if everyone joins with their microphones on, those 3 to 5 minutes will look like this. Hello, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Microphone. Can you switch off? Can you restart? Cats, kids, and so on. Why would you kill the 3 to 5 minutes, the highest attention span of your participants, with cats screaming in the background? Everyone should be muted. The 3 to 5 minutes are the moment for you to establish rapport, build credibility, bring vulnerability, talk about confidentiality, inform people what is going to happen, tell them what's going to happen, tell them what you told them. Establish that credibility with everyone in a quiet environment. I will always link it with offline. When you present offline and you start a workshop, a training, or so on, do you have all your participants jumping on your head, fighting for the microphone? No. When you start presenting, you welcome everyone. They're seated or standing, and you start with introduction, talking about program in the first part. Nobody moves, nobody talks, everyone listens. Why would online be any way different than offline? And that's what I call everyone on top of you. Now, there's another neuropsychology important element here, and that links to HSPs. I don't know if you know the concept, highly sensitive people. There are around 17 to 24% of people who are highly sensitive, which means that we have, and I'm one of them, I'm a highly sensitive person, we react higher to stimuli. In general, it's auditive stimuli, highly sensitive people. Shea as well. Now, what happens is that with a highly sensitive person, as we are so much more into the auditive part, if you start at the beginning with creating a lot of noise, microphony, cats screaming, and so on, the highly sensitive people will switch off. And you will not bring them back on for the rest of your session. Now, why should you care about the highly sensitive people? You should care because usually studies show that the highly sensitive people are the ones who are like the glue between the boxes. They are the ones who bring joy and connection to your session. They are the ones who have more of a feeling and connect people together, and all together, and I'm getting goosebumps, they create an experience together with you of that. Ignoring the highly sensitive people means ignoring the success of your session. I hope that makes sense. Next question.
Yeah, there is another question. Just a second. I've made a mistake with my screen. Reese said he was also talking about time frame and attention span. And he wanted to know, would you recommend a specific time of day for different types of online events?
Ah, that's a very good question. And my answer is, it depends. And of course, it depends, Reese, it depends on your audience. Are they joining from different countries, different time zones? If yes, it's a little bit, we go into cross-cultural psychology and understanding the psychology of that culture and adding that to it and how they show up and how you motivate them. And, you know, because I'll tell you something, if you are in a Latino country, and I'm not going to mention them, but in general, if you are supposed to meet at 8 o'clock, everyone will show up at 9:30. Guess what? People will do the same thing online. They're not going to show up 1 hour and a half later, but they will show up 5-7 minutes later online. So if you know that you have Latinos from Southern America, you better send them emails saying we really start on the clock, and be ready that they will show up at 05 if you're lucky. So we go back into, you know, cross-cultural psychology, but another massive thing. What I'm always saying is, if you have people who are from the same time zone, it depends on the type of content you are going to disseminate. So if we're talking about more of you sending out information like a webinar where they will just listen and actively type questions, then in general we recommend a later time of the day, because in the evening is usually when you sit on the TV, you watch the news, you are mentally ready to listen, to watch slides changing and so on. So if you have that kind of sending out information, and again, I see this happening unfortunately a lot, people are doing it in the morning. In the morning, people are not interested in content being thrown at them. Therefore, the impact of your presentation is unfortunately less. And we've run a lot of studies on that. So, for example, we run the webinars at 7 p.m. The reason for that is also the light is changing. So we start with natural daylight. And as the time is getting later, we have lights, which is changing the format of the same content. So we play with the lights, like you saw my light still change at the end in the back. And we're doing that in the evening. You create more of a show. That's your webinar. If we're talking about interactive workshops, as early as possible. Start at 8:30, start at 9 o'clock. Keep in mind, in the Netherlands, for example, people want to eat at 12:31. You shouldn't go later than 1 p.m. So you start, if you want to do a 4 hours and a half, very important. We need to know when people are eating, very important. Because, you know, depending where people are joining from, their eating habits is different. So start 8:30 to 1 p.m. the latest, if it's mostly German and Dutch. If you have Latin people joining or people from Eastern Europe, then you might want to start 9:30 to like 1:30, because then they're gonna start eating at 1:30. So this is why it's so important to understand who your audience is, where they're joining from, and so on. Online is a lot more difficult than offline, I give you that, but it guarantees the success of your session. And of course, people are much more entitled to interact and communicate in the morning than in the evening. In the evening, they just want to sit back, relax, and watch something. In the morning, they're very active and they will interact. I hope this answers the question. Oh, you also have the afternoon, 2 o'clock. So not immediately after lunchtime. After lunchtime, you have the lunchtime dip. You don't want to run webinars or workshops then. So make sure you have it at 3 o'clock, for example, or 2:30, not at 1 o'clock. People are going to be all over the place, just not listening to you at all.
I must say, I was once in a session where someone was demonstrating hypnotism, and he specifically did it after lunch. And everybody in the room, 30 people, we were all hypnotized. It's easy. It's the best time.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Does anybody else have any questions or want to throw in anything that's impacting them online?
We still have a few minutes, so ask your questions, because there's definitely a lot of them.
I don't think there's any more of the pre questions left.
Okay, then I have two other questions that I'm going to touch on. One of them is this, the microphone.
The microphone.
And Shay's already looking at her microphone. So let me explain the power of this little thing called a lavalier microphone. Do you all hear me well right now, by the way? Great. My microphone is not even connected. The reason I'm having a lavalier microphone is because studies show that my credibility increases tenfold, and you will perceive me as a much more experienced and much more credible presenter expert because of this. As human beings, we learn associatively. The lavalier microphone you usually see on the TV anchors and on the presenters. Also, TV anchors are moving their shoulders like this. So sometimes I'm resting my arms and I do this because, again, it links to a TV anchor. And the highest type of credibility you can give me online is if you associate me with a TV anchor. They always have this. 3 reasons you're wearing it. Reason number one is, you will look more professional. Reason number 2 is for you. As you once in a while look at yourself in the camera, and do not tell me you don't check yourself in the camera, because we all know that you do. As you check yourself in the camera, you also see yourself wearing a lavalier microphone, and you are just as biased as everyone else. And associatively, you see yourself as a TV anchor, and you feel better about yourself, which increases your energy that you have during a training. The third thing, and that is the most important thing, by wearing a lavalier microphone, you tell your audience that you care so much about the quality of sound and the quality of what you offer that you take the time to have this. Now, the reason mine is not connected is not because I'm playing a trick. It's because I'm using a ultra high definition webcam that has 3 embedded microphones in it. And of course, I ran a lot of different sessions. And it turns out that for me, it works better to wear to have the microphone of the webcam. But again, it's a highly professional, quite expensive webcam, and that's the reason I'm not connecting this. But otherwise, I would very much suggest that you get this. If you want to use it just to show off, so to say, then just buy a normal shotgun omnidirectional microphone, which is 15 euro, 20 euro. If you do want to use it, and you want to even film LinkedIn video, for example, then I recommend a higher TRRS microphone. That is usually from Rode, R-O-D-E. Again, I'm not associated nor affiliated with any brand. I'm only sharing my perspective. Rode, R-O-D-E, and those are good because you can connect them with your phone and you can connect them with your computer. And that's around 80 euro that you want to use. We can go into something more complex. This is a TRS, but I'm not going to go there. This is for a different type of recording. And that's also one of the reasons I don't connect it, because actually it doesn't work with a computer. Any other question?
Yeah, there's one just come in from, oops, from Anka Gabriella. Please give your tips when during a webinar workshop we're facing internet issues.
Oh, one of my favorite ones. And because I'm a highly sensitive person, when the thing disconnects, I'm like, so one of the most important things that we need to do is to always have an auxiliary internet connection and an auxiliary power connection. What do I mean by that? Before you start your training, workshop, webinar, make sure your laptop battery is fully charged. If the electricity will drop in your house, your computer will still be able to run for a few hours, so you can still continue to do your webinar. Now, I know that if you don't have electricity in your house, you're not going to have internet either. So you always need to have an auxiliary internet connection. Sometimes your internet connection will drop. There is nothing worse than you to be the host or the presenter and to disconnect and not to come back. Same thing. You invite people to a dinner party, they arrive, and then suddenly you lock yourself into the toilet and you can't get out. It's embarrassing. So always have an auxiliary internet connection. You have two options. Either you ask your neighbors and you say, listen, I'm not going to connect to your Wi-Fi, but if my Wi-Fi drops, I would feel very comfortable to have an auxiliary internet connection. Or you take your phone and you have internet on your phone and you transform your phone into a portable hotspot. So the second you are going to disconnect, you connect automatically to your phone internet connection and you continue. So this is about connectivity, number one. Number two, you can have the best camera in the world, high definition, ultra high definition. If you don't have enough upload speed, you're still going to have a crappy transmission. So you need to check not only the download of your internet connection, but also the upload. Upload is very important. If you have a low upload, let's say somewhere around 10 MBs, it's time to increase your internet connection. It might be more expensive. You want to have at least 40 MBs upload. That is more than enough for you to send high quality audio and high quality video to your participants. The way you appear in your camera makes a huge difference in the way you are being perceived and as an expert next to your content expertise and presentation skills.
All right, thank you so much. We have a question from Valentina. If you are an HSP and you conduct workshops online and the students are inexperienced with the online format and etiquette, is it okay to inform them of your expectations of their behavior, or is that a bit too strong?
You are the HSP or they are the HSP?
I think if, it sounds like if we are as the facilitators, yeah.
It's a very good question. It links to vulnerability and authenticity. Being an HSP, for a lot of people, it happens, a lot of us don't know that we are highly sensitive. Also, we struggle our entire life because it is difficult to have stimuli, to feel emotions in a certain way. And sometimes we're even told as children, why can't you be like a normal child? Because we're highly sensitive. So being highly sensitive, once you deal with it and you're okay with it, is an amazing thing to have. But for most of us, it's still a shame to say that we're highly sensitive. So if you are comfortable in your skin with being a highly sensitive person, and I hope you are, and I salute you, and I admire you, and I respect you, then bring that together, explain how you are as an HSP, and explain why certain stimuli or why certain things are important to you. Link them back to them. The more they help you, the more you help them. But keep in mind that always when we are online, it should always be WIFT, what's in it for them. You are there only as a catalyst. You should be the catalyst. You should be the tool. It should not be about you. It should be about them. And if it is about you, make sure that you put it in the context of them understanding why those things will make you give your absolute best, which as a result will give them the best possible experience. It's all about context. Context, context, context. Context is king, not content. And maybe it's good to give an example of what I'm talking about, content and context, because I know that a lot of people, everyone says content is king. Absolutely not true. Content is not king. Context is king. Content, if I can associate it with something, is a point. That is content, a point. Now, I see from Shea, king, queen, we're not here to talk gender, and Shea, you know me, I am the biggest supporter of, all the, totally non-gender, non-biased, non-race, non-whatever. I'm just using the king, queen, non-gender, whatever it is the concept. But very well spotted, and thank you very much for that, because again, bringing context to the situation. Content is a point. And very often, this is people's point of view. And it's very sad. Context is everything that happens around, which will make us see that content from different ways, which allows us to connect as human beings. And I'll always have I can show you this as an example. I have a cup. This is my cup. It's an office idiot cup. We can have a conversation for hours where you're telling me that you're looking at an office idiot cup. And I will tell you that I'm looking at a red cup. We are both right. And we will fight over this because you see an office idiot and I see a red cup. This is content. Now, context means giving it perspective. As I start turning the cup, it turns out that I was right to see a red cup, and you were right by calling it an office idiot. By giving it perspective and putting it in a contextual situation, then we actually have a conversation rather than having a fight. Content is not king or queen. Context is. And we should always make sure to develop as much context as possible in every situation. As in The Little Prince of Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, one of my favorite books, chapter 21, The Fox and the Prince are talking. If you didn't read The Little Prince, I urge you to take the book right now and read it. It's 3 hours and it will be one of the best experiences of your life, I guarantee. The Prince and the Fox, this might sound silly, but that's the book. The prince is asking the fox how to tame the fox. And the fox says, first time you will sit next to me and you will say nothing. Words are the source of misunderstanding. So ladies and gentlemen, very often verbal communication creates a lot of conflict, creates a lot of misunderstandings because we don't give context to it. Sometimes not talking and showing things or adding context to that language situation increases so much more the communication. And very often we realize that we were all looking at the same thing. We just saw it from different angles. And actually, that's not a problem. Quite the contrary, it's beautiful. We learn something about each other. So context is very important, especially online. Any other question?
None in the chat, but you said you had one more question on your list?
Oh yeah, it's not a question, but there was something that I'm always, I see from Margarita. I think Margarita asked before about the webcam. Very good question. Again, I'm not associated with any company. Based on my experience, the Logitech is making the best cameras. And I used to have a Logitech C920. Logitech C920. It cost €110 maximum price. That's the one. 920. Let me type it. It's Logitech C920. This is the one. Now, this costs around €110, and it's great because it has 2 microphones in it and it has high definition video. I warmly recommend this. I had it for years, and as price quality is the best on the market. The bad news is that it's out of stock already since March 27, and unfortunately it's still out of stock. Logitech was overwhelmed with cameras. Look for it on bol.com or all these companies, and don't pay more than €110. It should not be more than €110. Once it's available, please purchase it. You solve your microphone and your camera. What you're seeing right now as you're looking at me is also a Logitech, and that is the Logitech 4K Brio. It's a 4K ultra high definition camera with 3 microphones, but that one is around 350 euro. And I'm always saying, if you do this for a living, right? We do webinars, and you know, for us, the quality of image needs to be impeccable. Also angles and what we create, then invest into that Logitech 4K Brio. I wouldn't say you need it. I would say if you're going with the Logitech 920, you're more than fine, and people really appreciate you. They will send you an email afterwards. They say, wow, the quality was so great. I had such a great experience. That's what we want to create, a great experience. And again, think of your budget and think of how often do you do this, right? Like we do webinars 2, 3, 4 times a week, and we do a lot of one-on-one calls via the webcam. So for us, this was a needed investment. You know, I'm not going into neuromarketing, not trying to sell you anything. Decide if it's a need to have or a nice to have. Totally up to you. And linked to that, there was sure, Margarita, and very good to see you here, and happy to see you also with our Margarita joined our webinar. She's going to join it again because she wants to do it again. So very happy that you're here and that you're asking questions. There was one thing, which is, let's say, the final thing, because I don't know how much time do we still have, and it is linked to how we pretend that we are paying attention whilst we are actually browsing other pages. And let me showcase. This is me looking into the camera, pretending that I pay attention. And let me change to, look at this. So let's do this. Can you see changes on my face? This is what I do. I'm checking different things. Oh, I have an email. I'm moving from white to black. Everybody can see this. I can see this. As you're changing and browsing through your internet pages, I can see you're doing it. So there's 2 things there. Number 1, if you really are dedicated to that session, make sure that those 60 or 90 minutes, you really pay attention to that trainer, speaker, or put your cameras off. It's less hurtful for a person, for a speaker or presenter, not to see you than to see changes of luminosity on your face. We all know what you're doing. Now, as a presenter or as a trainer, if you see one person having that, you know, you can't make everyone love you. God knows I tried. But if you see all your participants' face flickering, that means your content is poor, they're tired, there's no interaction. That is an alarm sign for you. And don't take it personally. Just ask the question, guys, do we still have you here? Should we take a break? Is there anything you would like to know? We need to look into these visual cues to interact with the audience. And if you see, I guarantee you, if you have 3 or 4 participants flickering through things and you say, are you guys okay? Is this working well? Please be honest, because if it's not, we can change it into a Q&A. People appreciate that because it shows that you care. It shows that you care about them being there. Not only do you acknowledge them, but you acknowledge the time and energy they're giving you. Don't feel offended. You know, we get bored, we get tired, we change slides, but it's better to address it. It really works.
Yeah, thanks very much, Bogdan. We're coming to the end now. I think everybody's asked all the questions they want to ask. And it just is up to me to say thank you very much for being so generous with your information and your knowledge. I think everybody's got a huge amount out of this this session.
Sorry to interrupt. I really, really hope that all the information that you have, please don't keep it just for yourselves. Share it. Again, we don't know what we don't know. Share this around to people. It goes back to, again, one of my favorite quotes from Maya Angelou: when you learn, teach. When you get, give.
Yeah, and following on from that, I totally agree. As we said before, this is recorded and it will be going on to the YouTube video. Also, if you want to just save the chat, because the questions are in there and it might prompt you for, as you're watching the video again, if you need to refresh your memory, you can save the chat by going to the bottom of the chat and the 3 buttons next to the file at the end of the chat, if you save it there. Clarissa's going to just post the feedback form and also the link to the tickets for the next weekly chat next week, which is 4, and she's doing a presentation and interactive session on how to develop CV, so recruiters are going to take notice of it. So I think that'll be a really interesting one for anybody who's at present updating the CV. And
Jane, could I just make one small remark about the workshop that's coming up next Friday? It's going to be the Power Up CV workshop. So, and that's with Floor, one of our board members. So it would be great for you guys to learn more about CV writing and also hear some more tips about how to improve your CV writing. So sorry, Jane, go ahead. I just wanted to add that one little part there.
No, that's okay. And that's it really. Just thank you very much for taking the time to join us again this Friday. And thanks very much, Bogdan. And we'll see you all. Well, we hope to see you all again soon. Okay, thanks.